Walt Allen Stoy. Walt.
Oh, this is great. This is what you always hear everybody talk about. I can see a little bit of the front row and nothing else. So just for the rest of the 10 of you, when you get up here, don't expect to see anything beyond here. Like everybody else, thanks to Jess and eService Technologies for sure, and that I'm not going to use slides. I got told that tell a story. Just tell the story of your life or tell the story of whatever you want. So I've jotted down a variety of notes. To begin with, I like to think about Mark Twain, whose statement was, the two most important dates in your life are the date that you're born and the date and time you figure out why you're here, what your purpose is. And what I want to share with you in my little 20-minute period is a little bit of my life and what the purpose is and what I've become. And then, so in the spirit for Gary Harvat, of course, you know, he said, tell a story. So I have to begin this way. Once upon a time, there was a couple, Mary and Earl Stoy, who lived in a very small town in southwestern Pennsylvania called Carmichael's, and they had 3 children, and the middle child was Walt, the only son. And that there actually is a picture of me, circa 1960, of standing in front of the Christmas tree. And I'm sure you've either gotten this or you've gotten it for your kids or your grandkids. It's the medical bag. You recall the medical bag? Stethoscope, thermometer, plastic syringe. I've got it for my granddaughters as well. And I'm standing in front of the Christmas tree, holding the bag, stethoscope around my neck, and I'm on roller skates. It was the precursor to let me know I was going to do medicine, paramedicine, later found out, and do it on wheels. So who knew? But it could happen. So real quick, some of the early years. I'll go all the way up towards like 9th grade, 14 years old. My beginnings, like beginnings maybe for other folks as you get involved into EMS, was at the pool. You know, I'd spent a lot of time at the pool. I trained as a lifeguard, and next thing you know, at a very young age, at 14, and particularly towards 15, I was a lifeguard at the pool, and I was advised by others to lie about my age and go take the WSI course, the Water Safety Instructor course. You're supposed to be 17, but at 15, I'm riding with the other folks growing up, and I met what I always reflect back to be my real first mentor, Betty Walker, who taught WSI, and she was the first to really integrate with me a little more in depth about what the world would be like as far as medicine. And how many of you, and again, I can't see your hands, so this is going to be a little tough. If you're old enough, the older folks here, the first aid books that we used, how many of you were taught the Sylvester method? Or the Holzer-Nelson, back pressure arm lift? In with the good, out with the bad. Norm remembers, a few others I'm sure. So that was my introduction to the system. And then as we moved along, from my water efforts, I was a sophomore in high school at the time, and as Bob talked about, and I'm sure the other 10 people may mention in some way or another, what was January 72 famous for? Emergency. I'll say the first 3 parts to it. I'll expect the rest of you to give the rest of the answer, okay? KMG, 365. Now, only a handful of folks sounds like knows that. So the rest of you, you need to start watching some reruns of Emergency because you get excited when you hear KMG 365. You also get excited if you hear the tones for Squad 51 being toned out. So Papa had, I graduated high school in May of '74. I only applied to one college, Cal U, which was just down the street from Carmichael's. Suitcase college for me. I was able to drive down Sunday night, be there for classes, drive home Friday, have my mom do the laundry every week. It was great. And it was there that I was taking time and space, my time, their space. I had Terry Scott teach a class on first aid, a little more advanced. There actually was CPR in that class. and that I also had an opportunity to find some other classes that were there that almost may have resulted in me doing something else. And I'm sure that's true for all the folks that have been here reflecting back on your lives, that, there's so many pathways you could have taken that when the door opens, you got to make sure you're taking the right one or just accept the one you take. But I was able to get in to nursing classes. And what CalU was offering is RNs who needed to take classes to get their BSN, they let me in. And that I got to class early. It was 2 nights a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I get there early. I sit down in the middle seat of the entire classroom. The first lady comes in, the second lady, lady. I am sitting with 40 women. I'm in the middle. I'm in a target-rich environment, gentlemen. I mean, I'm thinking I'll like the class, I'm sure, but maybe I should go into nursing. Holy moly, my goodness, what a wonderful time. And I learned stuff. It was community medicine, and also, school health nursing and such, but it worked out. So in '75, I was told about an EMT program that was going to take place at Uniontown Hospital. Just down the street from CalU, and I had a car, so I was able to go. Probably Terry Scott or somebody had told me about it. 3 years after emergency had been on, I'm finally going to get to go take an EMT course. And while I'm there, I did okay with it. It was the original Orange Book. For everybody who did that, you can recall what was there. Took the test, passed. And believe it or not, we had a little graduation event. Now, only a handful of folks here will know the name I'm going to talk about, but we had a guest presenter come for our graduation and talk to us and enlighten us. Gary Fulton. Clap if you know Gary Fulton. Good, because I can't see it. I'd say raise your hands, but can't tell. So Gary came and talked about what we were told was the City of Pittsburgh Super Ambulance. Were there articles on that, Bob? There were. So that was the talk. I remember it as I'm sitting there thinking, super ambulance. Man, I want to play there. So I finished my EMT. I go back to Carmichael's down in Greene County. I'm working with a funeral home-based EMS service, which many of us older folks worked at funeral home-based EMS services in Oseco's, and Carmichael's was the first with Mickey. And I go on my first official ambulance call. Now, I want to take you back just for a second to another date. August 17, 1969. What happened? Anybody? Anything 69, if you just say 69, what was a big event in 1969? Woodstock. Woodstock, for those of you who maybe were saying it and I couldn't hear it. One of my all-time favorite groups, Crosby, Stills, Nash, played. It was their second time to perform. And what they got up on the stage and said was, this is only our second time to perform in front of people, and we're scared shitless. That was me in the back of the ambulance. It was my first time to perform, and I was grateful that the patient who was having cardiac symptoms and signs made it, because had he not, maybe I might have changed my mind on what the future could have been. But there is no question, riding in a Caddy Highboy is a wonderful experience for those of you who will never have the opportunity. So 1976, I figure I should just go to Pittsburgh. Gary Fulton said I should come and be part of the super ambulance, so I should figure out how to go do that. So go to Pittsburgh, go to CCAC. I'd already been 2 years at CalU taking time and space, 2 years at CCAC, starting in '76. And found out about Zeppel Ambulance. Anybody here work at Zeppel's? Clap your hands. All right, some of the old Zeppel folks here. And so 4 years of college, have an associate's degree. Parents were so proud. But while I was working at Zeppel's, I got told about Columbia Hospital, and you saw the slide, Al Shatner. Who here's an Al Shatner medic? Clap your hands, an Al Shatner medic. Clap your hands if you're a Weigel medic. There's a few, predominantly people in the north. And I was a Weigel medic as well, and I'll tell you about that if I have time in a bit here. But Bob was right. I remember there were two things that I'll always ask about. He would go, so how's the family taking it? Save the strips. And if the family was okay, he figured things would be okay. And it would be like, how's the family? And, not so good. He goes, well, I'll stay on the line, talk to me if you need to. So that worked out. In 77, I got the opportunity to join the super ambulance. I was part of the group when they moved from 5 ambulances to 8 ambulances and 2 rescue trucks. It was a large group of folks who got involved at that point. And for whatever reason, I ended up on Rescue 2. I think in part because, as well was talked about, Bob Fool, that I was willing to climb bridges, and at that age, I would just do whatever there was to do. You just asked me to do something crazy, I would do it. Today, at my age, my wisdom, if I show up to a scene, I want a lawn chair, a pair of binoculars, and a 6-pack. And I don't drink, so just, 6-pack of Mountain Dew or whatever. And I'm just going to sit there, and it's the rule of thumb. I put my thumb up. If I can't cover the entire scene, I'm too close. So that's where I am now. But back then, put me in, coach. I'm ready to play. And I'm surprised I got to really play. I'm glad Kathy got here, because Kathy got to tell a quick story about Glenn. So Glenn, I remember interviewing with Glenn. I go in, I sit down. He goes, tell me what your plans. And as I've always done with students for all my years as an educator, I ask them all the time, what's their 3, 5, 10-year plan? And Glenn asked me, what's your plan? I go, I give you 5 years. He goes, oh, really? I thought, that was the wrong thing to say. He's not going to take me. But he did. But I was only there 4 years. I was there 77 to 81. And but it was great. Glenn, Bob, and all the other folks they were the mentors. And that was the point where maybe I figured out what Mark Twain was talking about. I knew the date I was born. Now I knew why. In 1978, Ron Stewart comes to Pittsburgh. He's probably been my most significant mentor, and it still is today. I keep in touch with him, and he's just been great at teaching me 2 important things that I say are the foundations of what I do. I'm an educator, I'm a clinician, I do medicine, I do paramedicine, but the educator-clinician part of me comes from that. 1978 was also important because that's when I got married. Now, Becky here, who's already mentioned, her and I met back in 76. Remember 76? 76 is that time where, I was just headed to Pittsburgh and such, getting ready to head to Pittsburgh that fall. And we just both happened to be at the same dance. Now, the important thing is, I'm not going to gush too much about what she's done because I'll get emotional as well. But she is the foundation. Because with what I did from that moment on, I don't know how most women would take it. But at the dance, it was love at first sight. I glanced over and saw her. She saw me. She had hoped I'd ask her to dance. I did. And from that point on, for the last 48 years, we've been together. We've been married for 45 years. And so, round of applause for my wife, Becky. So, 78 as well, busy year. With Ron, started going to school again. I started working on a bachelor's degree. He was kind enough to be my mentor for my internship with what I was doing with that. And I had an office at the original center at Lothrop Hall. And by July 20, 1981, much like Bob talks about having to leave Pittsburgh, I left Pittsburgh EMS, and I went to the center. And Ron taught me what the word eclectic means, because I don't think I'd used it that much or knew what it was, but he was eclectic. He still is eclectic. And he got you involved in every little thing. So at that point, it was time to move out of the city, since I wasn't a city employee, and I moved to Shaler Township, and I joined Elfenwild Fire and EMS, Fire Ambulance, and spent 6 years there. And again, that's why I also consider myself to be a Weigel person, because I was a passive in hospital during clinical time. And then there was an opportunity as well to do many other things during that time. I got involved with the creation of STAT. Greg Porter, everybody know the name Greg Porter from Ross? Yeah. Everybody know the other Greg Porter from Pittsburgh EMS? Good. So that Greg Porter, the first Greg Porter and I were the ones who went to corporate jets and sit down with Jamie Barrett and said, we have an idea that, we want a helicopter. And the rest from there is history as far as working on those things. I did multiple degrees, the associate's, bachelor's, master's, doctorate. The important thing in doing everything was networking in retrospect. In the 90s, what I realized was there was time to reflect on some people that had been to Pitt. And if I picked just the names that are S's, you would think that, you'd start with Jonas Salk. You would go to Peter Saffer. You would end up then with Ron Stewart, who just got last month the highest honor of Canada, the Order of Canada, and has published a book that'll be out this fall called Treat Them Where They Lie, so if you can look those things up. Tom Starzl also started in 1981, at the same time as me. What he talked about is the years of risk, and the years of risk were the ages between 35 and 50. And my time period during that time was also matches that. There was projects for the federal government working on the EMT curriculum projects. First EMT Basic, where I told the feds I would do it ahead of schedule, under budget, more than they wanted. When they were done laughing their asses off and got off their floor back into their chairs, they said, nobody does that for us. I did. And then they sole sourced all the other projects to us, the first responder, the intermediate, and the paramedic. And as was pointed out, all the texts and everything else associated with that. In 2000, got involved, at the end of the 90s, got involved in the Middle East. And by 2000, I was really getting heavily involved in the Middle East. I'm still involved in the Middle East today on projects. As I look at where I was when it was time to retire, I stepped down from leadership positions within Pitt in 2018. In January of 22, I'd announced to the world I was retiring. I told Beck I thought we're going to end up on Social Security and our pension. But the phone calls, the emails, the text, everything else were just phenomenal. So I'm retired from Pitt and UPMC, but I'm not retired. I'm self-employed. The important thing I've learned is it's about networking. The whole time in reflection, it was about the networking. And I hope all of you will learn about the ability to find a good mentor, multiple mentors, and you be one, and also be that for them. So what I'm doing these days is editorial boards, expert witness, still teaching with Paul Paris at Pitt in the fall and spring terms, teaching at CMU in the OSHA programs. There's a lot still to be accomplished, a lot more that I think I can do. Few more years. I need to find a mentor. If there's somebody here today can identify themselves, I need to find a mentor to teach me how to retire, because for some of us, that's a difficult thing. As we've done EMS, I've always been reminded of a poem by a Welsh poet, Dylan Thomas. Some of you may know this. I'd like to just read the first line and invite you to go find the entire thing. You probably know it. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at the close of day. Rage against the dying of the light. In closing, Socrates' story, the Socratic method in Socrates. A person went to Socrates and said, I want to be wise, I want wisdom, I want to be successful. And Socrates said, meet me at the river. Guy goes down the next morning, meets him at the river, and thinks, this is great, I come down here, I meet with Socrates, and I'll be wise, I'll achieve success. Socrates walks into the river, and he waves for the man to come in, and the guy goes, okay, I go to the river, I walk into the river with Socrates, and I'll become wise, and I'll achieve success. Socrates takes his hand, places it on the individual's head, and pushes him down in the water, and the guy thinks, let him push me into the water, I'll become wise, I'll achieve success. And after about 30, 40, 50 seconds, the guy figures, I better let him know I need to breathe. So he starts pushing up. Socrates keeps pushing down, keeps pushing up, keeps pushing down. And while he's struggling then, frantically to get out of the water, then Socrates lets him come up. And he's gasping to get his breath. And while he's doing that, Socrates looks at him and says, when you're as hungry for the air you needed to breathe as you are to seek success and wisdom, then, and only then, will you get it. I'm still hungry for the air. Mark Twain was right. The two important dates. the date I was born, and why. And they all lived happily ever after. The end.